every time my fiancé played around with a side piece. I played around with the side piece's husband. We were partners in crime, and somehow managed to maintain a strangely respectful relationship, until one day, after he got involved with a young woman, he said to me, "This time, don't go dragging her husband into your little act. Her husband is obsessed with her and possessive as hell. If he finds out, she'll probably be scared to tears, and once that girl starts crying, she won't stop. I can't be bothered to comfort her. If you're jealous, take it out on me instead." I was speechless. Why didn't he tell me sooner? I'd already gotten involved, and now her husband was pressuring me to break off my engagement and give him a proper title. Chapter 1. The day I brought the engagement termination agreement home. I accidentally interrupted Bradley and his young mistress in the middle of an intimate moment. I really didn't mean to. After all, no matter how much Bradley fooled around before, he never brought anyone home. Adriana's skin was pale and flawless like jade. Her wide-eyed look of shock and embarrassment as she grabbed a thin blanket to cover herself made her look like a frightened little rabbit, so innocent and pure, completely different from the sexy, provocative women Bradley usually went for. Bradley lit a cigarette and watched her flee upstairs wrapped in the blanket, amusement dancing in his eyes. His tone was casual. "You saw it yourself. She scares easily, so this time, don't go dragging her husband into your little act. Her husband is obsessed with her and possessive as hell. If he finds out, she'll probably be scared to tears, and once that girl starts crying, she won't stop. I can't be bothered to comfort her. If you're jealous, take it out on me instead." I paused. My lips moved, but in the end, I said nothing. Instead, I pulled a document envelope from my bag and handed it to him. "Take a look. If there's anything unreasonable, we can discuss it." Bradley looked at me and took the envelope. For the first time, a trace of tenderness softened his usually cold features. "No matter how fun she is, she's still just a plaything. She's not worth being upset over." I froze for a moment before realizing he'd mistaken my hesitation for heartbreak. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Actually, crash! The sound of a glass shattering came from upstairs, followed by a short, helpless scream. Bradley's brows immediately knitted together. He got up and headed upstairs without hesitation. "Leave it. I'll read it later." He was in such a hurry to comfort his mistress that the explanation I had been about to give suddenly felt unnecessary. What I wanted to say was, I was actually here to end our engagement. Chapter 2. My engagement to Bradley had always been a business deal. He helped me fight off the illegitimate heir and reclaim my family's shares. I helped him hold the line and drive out the uncles and cousins circling his family's fortune. We were a power duo, evenly matched in every way, and together we won every battle beautifully. Standing on the 28th floor, I looked down over the city and lit a cigarette with carefree satisfaction. The smoke curled lazily between us, like fragrant cedar shavings slowly smoldering. The cigarette between Bradley's fingers was the same brand as mine, expensive, niche, and hard to find. He raised a brow. "What a coincidence." "Got a light?" I looked up, curled my lips into a smile, and nodded. The next second, he lowered his head and leaned closer, his cigarette between his lips. The tips touched. A spark flared to life. Our eyes met, desire and temptation igniting instantly. My palm pressed helplessly against the floor-to-ceiling window, only to be completely covered by a larger hand. His fingers forced their way between mine, locking together tightly, leaving me nowhere to run. Bradley spoiled people outrageously. He'd hand over shares worth tens of millions without hesitation, shower me with jewelry and designer bags as if they cost nothing, and sweet-talk me effortlessly. I thought my years of secret love had finally been rewarded. Then I walked in on another woman straddling him. Her high heels swayed back and forth as her red lips curled into a provocative smile. "Miss Melissa, your fiancé is amazing. To be fair, you're welcome to borrow my husband anytime." Unlike the half-dressed woman, Bradley remained impeccably dressed. There was no lust on his face, no sign of indulgence, and certainly none of the guilt of a man caught cheating. He merely lounged there with half-lidded eyes, amusement and scrutiny dancing in his gaze. An arranged marriage wasn't exactly a love match. Everyone played their own games. What was strange about that? My nails dug into my palm, yet I smiled and turned to Bradley with a flawless expression. then I won't be shy about it. That night, I checked into one of Bradley's hotels with the woman's husband. After that, whenever Bradley took a new mistress, I would quietly return the favor by spending time with her husband. For years, we were accomplices in each other's games. In a twisted way, we even looked like a couple with a perfectly respectable marriage. Until one day, I overheard one of his friends teasing him. Only then did I realize what a fool I had been. Bradley, your fiancé keeps throwing money around to buy other women's husbands and put on an act, pretending she doesn't love you, pretending she's a player. It must be exhausting. She's been into you for years. Aren't you worried she'll finally give up on you and start playing for real? Half of Bradley's face was hidden in the shadows of the private room. He exhaled a cloud of smoke, his tone lazy and self-assured. She won't. So that was it. The secret crush I thought I'd hidden so well. The indifference I thought I'd performed so perfectly. The self-respect I'd struggled to preserve. To Bradley, it had all been laid bare under the blazing sun like a filthy rag, fully exposed. Utterly worthless. As an adult, I rarely lost control of my emotions. But that night, I drank myself senseless in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows on the 28th floor. And when I slept with someone else, the pleasure was intense enough to bring tears to my eyes. I laughed and cried at the same time like a madwoman. Turns out love and desire really can be separated. What I didn't expect was that one moment of recklessness would leave me tangled up with someone. Claude sank his teeth into the back of my neck like a possessive guard dog marking its territory. Melissa, it was my first time. You have to take responsibility for me. Chapter 3. Young men tend to fall hard and possessive. Claude would demand a proper title for our relationship with red-rimmed eyes in bed. And once out of bed, he kept an even closer watch on me. In the short time it took me to get out of the car, go upstairs, and hand Bradley the breakup agreement, he had already flooded my phone with messages. 1 minute overdue. Do you really have that much to say to your ex-fiancé? 3 minutes overdue. Need me to come upstairs and make the bed for you too? When I got back into the car, I scratched under his chin the way one might tease a big dog. Stop sulking. There were special circumstances. His handsome face remained tightly drawn, but he stayed perfectly still and let me play with him. What special circumstances could you possibly have with him? I leaned closer. I accidentally caught my fiancé sleeping with your wife. I had to wait for them to finish. I teased him on purpose. Claude, are you jealous? He immediately straightened up like a ruffled dog, correcting me at once. Ex-wife, the divorce is already finalized. And what do you mean jealous? He looked at me with wounded indignation. You know perfectly well Adriana and I never had that kind of relationship. I'm clean. I've never been with anyone except you. His features were sharp and striking, deep-set eyes, a strong nose, the kind of face that looked almost intimidating. Yet whenever he lowered his gaze, his lashes trembled slightly like butterfly wings. That kind of pure-hearted innocence wrapped in such a dangerously handsome exterior was irresistibly attractive. No wonder Adriana had chased him for years and even schemed her way into marrying him. If Claude hadn't been so stubborn, leaving her in a marriage that existed in name only, then insisting on divorce after discovering the truth, why would Adriana have given up his family background, his looks, and become someone else's mistress? I watched his moving lips, my thoughts drifting elsewhere. Leaning closer, I lightly brushed my lips against his throat. I'm a little hungry. The tips of Claude's ears instantly turned scarlet. The blush spread across his entire face like wildfire. His Adam's apple bobbed quickly, yet he pushed me away without hesitation. No, his self-control in matters like this had always been non-existent. So I raised a brow in surprise. Then I watched him pull a thermal lunchbox from the side. His expression was completely serious. You worked late tonight and still haven't had dinner. Eat first, otherwise your stomach will start hurting again. I had ruined my stomach from drinking. The Move family had built its fortune through shady businesses in the early days, and traces of that ruthless streak still remained. Back when I was helping Bradley Moo lay out his plans, I had drunk so much I ended up with stomach bleeding, leaving lasting complications. Bradley had never cared much about it. Claude always did. My heart felt like a sheet of paper slowly soaked by something sour, turning soft and wrinkled. I lowered my head and finished the meal. After dinner, of course, I indulged in Claude too. We fooled around all the way from the car to the house. The energy of a 23-year-old man was honestly terrifying. The next morning, I was jolted awake by the sound of my phone ringing. Melissa. Something's happened. Chapter 4. By the time I arrived at the office, I was cursing under my breath. The promotional video for a major project was scheduled to be filmed today. The set was ready. The brand representatives were waiting. And somehow, the in-house model had vanished. I frowned. If the model can't be found, activate Plan B and put another model in. Why is everyone just standing around waiting? Not a single employee dared to meet my eyes. Melissa. Bradley personally approved the model. It's Adriana. And this morning, Bradley called himself and said she'd be arriving late. No matter how much Bradley played around before, he had never made it public. But this time, he was slapping me in the face in front of everyone. The looks people were giving me, both open and subtle, felt like needles piercing my skin. Anger churned through my veins. I wanted nothing more than to announce to the entire world that my engagement to Bradley had long existed in name only. But until the engagement was officially called off, I had to endure it for the sake of my family's stock price. I took a deep breath and slowly said, "Right, I remember now." I asked Adriana to deliver some documents to Bradley. "Let's use another model for now." The employees exchanged awkward glances. All the other models are out on location shoots. Even the brand representative was getting anxious. "Melissa, with your figure and your face, you're the perfect choice. Why are we even looking for another model? Please save us here." Thankfully, Claude hadn't left any marks on my skin last night. The brand's gown was a slightly daring spaghetti strap evening dress. After getting my hair and makeup done and putting on the jewelry provided by the brand, I stepped into the studio. As the shoot went on, the photographer couldn't stop praising me. "Miss Melissa, you're gorgeous. Have you ever considered becoming a model full-time?" The gloomy atmosphere vanished completely. The studio was filled with laughter and lighthearted chatter, until someone suddenly gasped, "Mr. Bradley, what brings you here in person?" Chapter 5. Adriana followed timidly behind Bradley. He glanced at me and gave a faint, unreadable smile. Why wasn't I informed that the model had been changed? The photographer was young, blunt, and incapable of reading the room. He was the first to speak up. "Miss Adriana was late for far too long." "I didn't mean to be." Adriana glanced at Bradley, her face instantly turning red. "It's just that last night." The photographer scratched his head, completely missing the implication. The brand needed the promotional photos and videos urgently, so we had no choice but to start shooting. The main thing is that Melissa is perfect for it. Just look. Bradley's gaze landed on the monitor. His expression revealed nothing. "Oh, what exactly makes her suitable?" The photographer launched into another enthusiastic explanation. "Great figure, beautiful appearance, flawless skin, excellent camera presence. She's perfect in every way." Bradley lifted his eyes and smiled leisurely. "This jewelry collection is aimed at women between 20 and 24. Does a 30-year-old woman really count as suitable?" The entire studio fell silent. The atmosphere instantly froze solid. Bradley could throw away all reason for the woman he wanted. I, however, still had stocks to worry about. Numb but composed, I spoke. "Get Miss Adriana into makeup. What are you all standing around for? Move." I headed to the dressing room to change out of the gown. All I wanted was to leave this miserable place as quickly as possible. The zipper got stuck. When someone pushed the door open, I assumed it was the stylist. "Come in, help me with the zipper." No one pulled back the curtain. Just as I was wondering what was taking so long, Adriana's soft voice drifted in. "Melissa, no need to rush changing. Bradley already had someone bring me another dress. After all, I don't like using things that someone else has already worn." The zipper suddenly came down smoothly. I slipped into my own clothes and let out a cold laugh. "Oh, but you don't seem to mind using a man who's been passed around plenty of times." The curtain was yanked open. Adriana's expression was no longer sweet and innocent. There was obvious anger in her movements. She pulled open her clothing, revealing countless purple marks scattered across her chest. With Bradley absent, she no longer bothered pretending to be a helpless little bunny. She flashed me a provocative smile. "Melissa, you don't have to comfort yourself with cheap coping mechanisms. Look at this. Your fiancé can't keep his hands off me. You must be dying of jealousy, old lady." I smiled back. Then I picked up my phone and started taking pictures. "Thank you, Adriana." for providing evidence of Bradley's cheating. Should I send these to the entire company so everyone can enjoy them together? She clearly hadn't expected that response. With a shriek, she hurriedly grabbed a blanket and wrapped herself up. Just then, someone called for me from outside. Their tone was urgent. "Melissa, Bradley is waiting for you outside. He said to watch your image and not get too worked up." Chapter 6. I strode out in my high heels, then slammed Bradley's car door shut behind me. Bradley was staring at his phone. On the screen were the promotional photos that had just been taken of me. The man had ordered the photographer to delete every copy. Yet somehow, he'd saved a set for himself. What a psychopath. Frowning, I reached for a cigarette. Instead, I pulled out a lollipop. Claude kept insisting my health was too poor for smoking and stuffed candy into my pockets every chance he got. I popped it into my mouth. Sweetness spread across my tongue, somehow smoothing out my irritation like a tiny iron pressing wrinkles from fabric. I had no interest in continuing whatever game Bradley was playing. "Did you read the document I gave you?" Bradley zoomed in on one of the photos, as though mocking the idea that an old woman like me could ever be chosen as an in-house model. "Since when did you start quitting smoking?" I ignored the question. "That was a termination agreement. Sign it." Only then did Bradley stop scrolling through the pictures. He looked up at me, amusement lingering in his eyes. 7 parts teasing, 3 parts intrigue. "One little plaything is enough to make you this angry?" I frowned. "Whoever you want to sleep with is your business, Bradley. It has nothing to do with me. I just want this engagement terminated immediately." One eyebrow lifted slightly. "Oh, why?" I told the truth. "The younger guy I'm seeing is getting clingy. He wants something official." A low laugh escaped Bradley's lips. "Your acting has improved quite a bit since before. Back then, that smug confidence of a man who knew he was loved would have infuriated me. Now that I'd finally let go, it barely stirred anything at all." My phone kept vibrating in my pocket. It had to be Claude. Knowing I was alone with Bradley, he was probably jealous again, so I simply added, "If there are any issues with the agreement, contact my lawyer." Then I reached for the door. It wouldn't open. The car had been locked. I turned around with a frown. Bradley had already moved closer, trapping me between his body and the seat. He leaned in, close enough that the woody scent of his cologne surrounded me completely. A vein throbbed at my temple. "Bradley, what exactly do you want?" Something cool touched my wrist. I looked down. A jade bracelet of the purest imperial green. I'd seen it in the news before. Worth 8 figures. Those cheap 5-figure accessories from the studio don't belong on your wrist. This one is barely acceptable. I looked up and met his gaze. The corners of his eyes tilted slightly upward. His features carried that same effortless charm, romantic, dangerous, and cruel all at once. A lazy smile rested on his lips. "Melissa, happy birthday." Chapter 7. 4 years. I kept dreaming about my 18th birthday. My stepmother drugged me and tried to send me to the bed of a strange older man. The person who saved me was one of the distinguished guests my father had respectfully invited to my birthday banquet. At the time, we barely knew each other. Everyone else chose to look away. They weighed the risks and benefits and stayed out of it. Only he stepped in. He grabbed the knife to save me and nearly had his palm pierced through. The wound was a bloody mess. My hands trembled as I bandaged it for him. Yet the man casually blew out a ring of smoke. The scent of cedar somehow made me feel safe. My tears fell onto the crooked little bow I'd tied around his hand. "Melissa, I heard at the party that you like fireworks." Startled, I looked up. He had already extinguished his cigarette. Then his long fingers suddenly spread open. There was laughter in his eyes as he spoke in the tone one might use to comfort a child. "Your own private fireworks. Stop crying. Happy birthday." The face that had once made my heart race overlapped perfectly with the face before me now. Time had left no mark on Bradley. If anything, it had favored him, gifting him with a deeper maturity and even greater charm. During the 5 years of our engagement, he had always treated me like this. He enjoyed my pathetic love. He enjoyed my admiration, but he never loved me back. Instead, he treated my heart like a kite he could play with at will. When I drifted too far away, he would pull the string. When I got too close, he would let it out, never once caring that the string was wrapped around someone's heart. Every tug tore through me. Bradley smiled casually. completely certain I wouldn't refuse him. Cat, got your tongue? The helicopter's ready. I'm taking you to Yen Island today. I promised you. I've never missed one of your birthdays. I was just about to speak when his phone rang. Adriana's crying voice came through immediately. Bradley. I fell from the prop rack. My leg hurts so much. Chapter 8. Bradley's departure was noticeably hurried. The only thing he left behind was a casual, confident, "Wait for me." I'd waited 5 years and never got a reformed playboy in return. Now, I didn't want to wait, and I wouldn't wait anymore. By the time I finished work and got home, it was dinner time. The moment I opened the door, the aroma of food drifted toward me. The table was covered with dishes I had loved as a child. Claude was wearing an apron. The outfit somehow made his broad shoulders and narrow waist even more noticeable. A faint blush appeared on his rebellious-looking face. I heard your mother was from South City. I might not have made these the authentic way. I don't know if they'll taste right. Give them a try. Young Master Claude raced sports cars and motorcycles. Yet here he was, cooking for me, lowering my gaze. I took a bite. It's delicious. Immediately, he looked like a giant dog that had just been praised and patted on the head. He was practically one step away from wagging his tail. After dinner, Claude covered my eyes and said he had a birthday gift for me. Over the years, as the Moo family's influence grew larger, the gifts Bradley Moo gave me became more expensive and more boring. I was long past the age of being surprised by presents. Yet when I opened my eyes, I froze. Before me was a familiar emerald jewelry set I hadn't seen in years. A 7-piece collection. My mother's heirloom. My stepmother had secretly sold it years ago. Because of its extraordinary value, the pieces had circulated through elite auctions around the world. Even I had eventually given up trying to recover them. How had this man managed to track down every single piece? Claude hurriedly reached over to wipe away my tears. Melissa, don't cry. The panic on his face made me laugh through my tears. I leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to his lips. Thank you. Claude froze. Like an innocent college boy with no experience whatsoever. His face turned bright red in an instant. The next second, my breath was stolen away. Time slipped by. Then, outside the enormous floor-to-ceiling windows on the 28th floor, a breathtaking sea of blue fireworks suddenly erupted across the night sky. The phone beside the bed kept vibrating. I paid it no attention. Naturally, I never saw the countless missed calls from Bradley, nor the messages he had just sent. Consider the fireworks my apology. Stop being mad at me. Still avoiding me? Fine, I'll let myself in. Claude pressed a precious kiss against my trembling eyelashes. At that exact moment, the electronic lock at the front door sounded with the beeps of someone entering the password. Chapter 9. I instinctively tensed all over. From the front door came the electronic prompt. Incorrect password. The only person besides me who knew the address of my private apartment and would try entering the code was Bradley. For 5 years. The password had been our engagement anniversary. It had never changed. Fortunately, after Claude came into my life, he had stubbornly insisted that I change it to our dating anniversary. I let out a sigh of relief. Not because I was afraid of Bradley catching us. I simply had no habit of letting a third person witness my private affairs. But then the sound of the keypad came again. I was surprised. Bradley rarely did the same pointless thing twice. Naturally, another mechanical voice followed. Incorrect password. The footsteps gradually faded into the distance, but my phone suddenly began vibrating violently. I had no intention of answering it. Before I could ignore it, however, my wrist was caught. My gaze collided with Claude's dark eyes. Something in my chest skipped. Normally, he was obedient and innocent. But in moments like this, he could be incredibly possessive and domineering. Claude stared at me. Don't answer his calls. Then he stubbornly added. And don't think about him either. The childishness in his tone made me want to laugh. A smile escaped me. Okay. Claude lowered his head and kissed me again. When I woke up the next day, it was already afternoon. Since I hadn't gone to the office, I opened the work group chat first. To my surprise, the promotional campaign for the jewelry line had somehow been restarted. I opened the brand's official website. The photos and videos Adriana had shot had already been removed from every platform. Right then, a message from Bradley popped up. Change the password back. Call me when you've calmed down. Even now. He thought I was just throwing a tantrum? I let out a cold laugh and replied, "For matters regarding the engagement termination and asset division, contact my lawyer. There's nothing else to discuss." Then I blocked every one of Bradley's accounts. After another nap in the afternoon, I felt refreshed. That evening, I headed to a private outdoor swimming pool. While changing into my swimsuit, I discovered something. My body was covered in red and purple bite marks. I bruised easily, and the marks always took forever to fade. That was why I usually never allowed anyone to leave too many marks on me. But last night, while trying to appease Claude, I'd let him get away with far too much. Just thinking about it made my face burn. Thankfully, no one could enter this place without my authorization. Feeling reassured, I changed into my swimsuit and slipped into the water. After only 2 laps, every muscle in my body felt sore. I cursed under my breath and climbed out. Moments later, I stretched out on a lounge chair with a glass of red wine in hand. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone approaching. Claude had gone to his racing club that afternoon. He'd said he would come by in the evening. Naturally, I assumed it was him, but when I looked up, I saw the last person I expected to see. Chapter 10. Adriana's gaze swept over me from head to toe with undisguised contempt. Her beautiful, delicate face was twisted with resentment. So that's why Bradley suddenly changed. "Melissa, aren't you disgusting?" I'd almost forgotten. Bradley also had access to this place. Suddenly, even the pool water looked dirty to me. Adriana pressed forward aggressively, righteous indignation written all over her face. "You knew you couldn't keep Bradley, so you deliberately slept with someone else to force him to choose between being cheated on and giving me up. You made him distance himself from me." An old woman whose fiancé won't even touch her must have gone looking for some pot-bellied old man to sleep with. Do you really think degrading yourself to win back a man is something to be proud of? Before I could say anything, the venomous expression on her face suddenly vanished. For the first time, she looked her age, young, confused, almost innocent. "Claude, what are you doing here?" Claude walked over to stand in front of me. He wore only a pair of swim trunks, broad shoulders, long legs, defined abs, and visible across his body were unmistakable red marks and scratches, traces of intimacy that disappeared beneath the waistband. Then he turned around. His broad back became a solid wall between Adriana and me, and calmly said, "Because I'm the man you're talking about." I nearly spat out my wine. It was the first time I'd ever seen someone's face go completely blank. Several seconds passed before Adriana finally managed to speak. Her voice carried a desperate trace of hope. "She forced you to stay with her, didn't she?" Claude remained blunt as ever. "No, I was the one who pursued her. I like her." Unlike her usual carefully crafted helpless act, Adriana froze completely. She pushed her hair back from her forehead once, twice, 3 times. Only then did she find her voice. "I chased you for 4 years. 4 whole years. I even slept with one of your friends just to marry you. And the moment you found out I'd never actually slept with you, you divorced me. I loved you that much. You didn't love me, but you love her? Do you even know that she's only with you because?" Her eyes turned red. Her lips trembled several times. Finally, she looked like someone who had nothing left to lose. Almost crying out, she said, "Because I slept with her fiancé. She wanted revenge. She thought we were still married. So she came to you. She's only using you. Do you really think a calculating woman like that is worth loving?" Claude's back was to me. I couldn't see his expression. And honestly, Adriana wasn't wrong. That was exactly how things had started between us. Ugly, messy, selfish. I thought her words wouldn't affect me, yet my nails still dug unconsciously into my palm. Then Claude's voice rang out, firm and unwavering. "That's probably the only good thing you've ever done." Both Adriana and I froze. His tone was almost cheerful. "If you hadn't schemed your way into marrying me, and if you hadn't become her fiancé's mistress, she never would have found me." He let out a relieved breath. Thank God I had something Melissa could use. The heart I had spent years turning into stone instantly transformed into a young bird, crashing wildly against my ribs. Adriana broke down completely and started crying. She had provoked me countless times. I should have felt satisfied seeing her like this. But strangely, I didn't. People who love without being loved back always end up shedding far too many tears. Just then, 3 slow claps broke the silence. The sound was completely out of place. Bradley had arrived. Chapter 11. Bradley walked over, his gaze lingering on the skin exposed by my swimsuit. His tone revealed nothing. "Melissa, this is quite the show. Why don't you introduce us?" Back when I still loved Bradley, during my most painful moments, I had often imagined what his expression would be if I ever truly moved on and fell for someone else. So this was it. Calm, unbothered, almost indifferent. Fortunately, I had already let go. It didn't hurt anymore. Meeting his eyes, I said, "You heard her. This is Adriana's ex-husband, my boyfriend." "Oh." A gentle smile curved Bradley's lips. "So this is the clingy little boy you mentioned, the one demanding a title." Claude stepped in front of me. "If you have a problem, take it up with me." Bradley's kick came so suddenly that no one had time to react. Claude staggered backward and crashed to the ground. No one even saw Bradley move. The next second, he was already on top of Claude. Adriana let out a startled scream. I shot to my feet. Bradley always carried himself like a charming playboy, but underneath that polished exterior was someone ruthless. The corner of his lips lifted slightly. The smile never reached his eyes. "I'm talking to my fiancé." "Who said you could interrupt?" Another punch came flying down. Claude caught it with one hand. Claude was a boxer. Though the surprise attack had put him at a disadvantage initially, he quickly recovered and started trading blows with Bradley. I tried to stop them. Neither listened. Both had completely lost their tempers. When I saw Bradley's fist about to slam into Claude's eye, my heart clenched. Before I could think, the wine glass in my hand flew toward Bradley. The instant it shattered, I rushed forward and helped Claude to his feet. "Are you okay?" Claude's gaze softened. He shook his head. "I'm fine." Then Adriana screamed, "Bradley, you're bleeding." Only then did I look at him. He shoved Adriana aside. Blood trickled down the side of his face from a cut near his temple. A shard from the shattered glass had sliced his skin. Bradley was always immaculate, always composed. The last time I'd seen him this disheveled was 5 years ago, right after our engagement. His father had died. The Mu family had fallen into chaos. His third uncle set a trap, detained him at the family estate, and demanded he hand over control. Publicly, I pressured them through business projects. Privately, I had his uncle's nephew kidnapped. When his uncle finally arrived, face dark with fury, bringing Bradley in exchange for the boy, he coldly warned me, "Bradley, a knife that's too sharp isn't always a good thing. One day it might cut the hand holding it." I understood exactly what he meant. Holding Bradley's hand, I smiled and replied, "Don't worry, Uncle. The knives in my family always point outward." I had always been ruthless and fiercely protective of my own people. That principle had never changed. The only difference now was that Bradley had become the outsider. Bradley's expression darkened further. "You can play around with outside distractions if you want." His eyes locked onto mine. "Melissa, when you've had your fun, it's time to come home with me." Chapter 12. Home? During the 5 years Bradley spent fooling around with other women, all I ever wanted was for him to come home. That longing, paid for with my self-respect, often reminded me of my mother. She had waited year after year for my father to come home. In the end, all she got was the mistress who came to take her place and my father's countless illegitimate children. The depression eventually drove her to take her own life. I pitied her misfortune, and I hated her weakness. Yet because I fell in love with Bradley, I became her. Day by day, I turned into the person I despised most. Now that I had finally broken free, Bradley was telling me to come home. The absurdity made me laugh. "Bradley, what home do we even have left? Go get your head checked, and try not to die. I don't want the liability. Also, sign the termination papers immediately." The blood running down Bradley's face looked alarming. Yet he seemed completely indifferent to the pain. There wasn't a trace of warmth in his eyes. "You were just temporarily distracted by some trash from outside. But no matter how much you play around, you still come home in the end." So he wasn't planning to sign. Claude's expression darkened. I stopped him and calmly said, "If you don't want to end the engagement, that's fine. It'll take at most 6 months for the Moo and Sue families to completely separate their business interests. Bradley stared at me stubbornly. You didn't like me seeing other women. Now I know. If there are things I do that you don't like, I can stop. For the next 6 months. I'll prove it to you. Melissa, do you believe me when I say there's no way you'll actually be able to go through with breaking off our engagement? Even now. Bradley spoke with the confidence of a man who had been loved for far too long. He was certain that if he tugged on the string again, I would come running back. Claude's fists clenched tightly at his sides. A smile suddenly appeared on my face. Oh, then why don't you give it a try? Chapter 13. In the days that followed, Bradley seemed like a completely different person. He had rarely come to the office before. Now he showed up every single day. The first thing he did was fire Adriana. The second was start following me around to the studio. The new female model had been my choice. The only issue was the male watch model. No suitable candidate had been finalized yet, and the team was still auditioning people. The brand targeted a clientele that valued sophistication, status, and effortless charm. Then one employee quietly muttered, I honestly think Bradley would be perfect. I said, we've got plenty of time this round anyway. Bradley, want to give it a try? Bradley loved watches. His standards were notoriously high. Anything worth less than 7 figures might as well have been an insult on his wrist. Yet he simply said, sure. Bradley had always been the sort of man who became the center of attention wherever he stood. Naturally, the finished photos turned out exceptional. I studied them with interest while compliments filled the room. Then I spoke. They're definitely good. A slight frown appeared on my face. But my voice was clear enough for everyone to hear. This watch is marketed toward men between 20 and 24. Bradley is 33 this year. Isn't he? Wouldn't that make him a little too mature for the brand image? The room instantly fell silent. Everyone exchanged nervous glances. No one had ever publicly embarrassed Bradley before. His expression froze for several seconds. Then he regained his composure. You make a fair point. The satisfaction I felt washed away years of resentment. I was still smiling when I returned to my office. Claude, who had become ridiculously vigilant lately, immediately asked, what are you smiling about? I leaned down and kissed his eyes. I'm smiling because no matter how much an old cucumber paints itself green, it'll never be as fresh as a young one. The young cucumber blinked, then grinned foolishly. Obviously. And he's not just an old cucumber. He's a rotten one. Using the excuse of being my cousin's younger brother, Claude practically lived in my office these days. Naturally, he ran into Bradley often. Whenever Bradley was alone, Claude would deliberately tug his coat collar lower, revealing faint traces of love bites. I knew nothing about any of that. All I noticed was that Bradley smoked more and more heavily. One day during a business discussion, I frowned slightly. Next time, come talk to me after the smell of smoke is gone. Bradley's hand paused on the document. I haven't changed brands. It's still the one you liked. I didn't even look up. But I quit smoking. Bradley opened his mouth. Yet no words came out. Even so, he continued showing up at the office every single day, patiently enduring every bit of my deliberate retaliation. And somehow, he still looked completely confident, completely certain he would win. That confidence finally cracked one evening. The meeting had run late. When I returned to my office, Claude had fallen asleep on the couch. I quietly walked over. Truthfully, Claude's features were sharp and rebellious. Cute wasn't a word anyone would normally use to describe him. Yet for some reason, I found him adorable, unable to resist. I lowered my head and placed the lightest kiss on his forehead. Then I looked up and met Bradley's eyes through the doorway. Even when I had smashed a wine glass over his head, he had never worn an expression like that. There was panic in his gaze, and pain. So much pain that it looked almost unbearable. Chapter 14. Bradley lost control and grabbed my wrist. The commotion woke Claude. He was on his feet almost instantly, ready to fight. I took a deep breath and said to Claude, it's okay. Let me talk to him one last time. Claude stared at Bradley for several seconds before finally unclenching his fists. Perhaps it was the words one last time that struck Bradley. For the first time, he no longer looked like the man who remained calm through every storm. Inside the empty conference room, his voice carried an unusual urgency. Melissa, I was wrong. I got our relationship completely wrong. Break things off with him. There won't be any other women from now on. Let's start over, okay? I frowned. And why exactly should I start over with you? Because we're in love. He stared at me, his voice rough. Why should two people who truly love each other be apart? I looked at him coldly. Because you never loved me, Bradley. You've always loved yourself more than anyone else. Why pretend otherwise? The only reason you're acting like this now is because you can't accept that the woman who spent years chasing after you has finally walked away. My calm gaze seemed to burn him, yet he refused to look away. His eyes were bloodshot. His Adam's apple bobbed several times before he finally managed to speak. That's not true. I love you, Melissa. I love you. I'd loved him in secret for 13 years, then spent another 5 years after our engagement desperately waiting for him to love me back. Now he was finally offering me the words I'd wanted for so long. Yet I didn't want them anymore. Calmly, I stated the truth. But I don't love you anymore. Sign the agreement as soon as possible. I turned and walked away. Bradley's voice came from behind me. Then hate me. His voice was low and hoarse. Hating me is still better than treating me like a stranger. Chapter 15. Several months later, the Moo and Sue families finally completed the division of their assets. My engagement to Bradley became nothing more than a worthless piece of paper. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows on the 28th floor, holding a glass of wine. A financial news report played on the television. The Moo Group had been found to have massive financial irregularities. Bankruptcy was imminent. When Bradley Moo called, I answered. I'd assumed he would hate me. The Moo family had made countless enemies over the years. The crisis wasn't my doing, but I had seen it coming and chosen not to warn him. I simply stood by and watched. Yet Bradley's voice carried relief. An unmistakable hope. Melissa, you've always believed in getting even. Why didn't you finish us off when you had the chance? Why leave the Moo family a way out? You can lie to yourself, but you can't lie to me. His voice trembled. You still love me, don't you? From the 28th floor, the people below looked tiny. Even those years spent crying silently by these same windows felt impossibly distant now. I let out a quiet sigh. Whether I was speaking to Bradley or to myself, I wasn't sure. For all these years, my feelings toward you were always divided. Sometimes I loved you, sometimes I hated you, but my heart never stopped beating for you. Then I placed a hand over my chest and smiled. But today, it's finally at peace. On my 18th birthday, Bradley had pulled me from the hands of fate. He saved me from disgrace, saved me from a lifetime of heartbreak. And now, by doing nothing at all, I had repaid that debt. Softly, I said, now we're truly even. We don't owe each other anything anymore. Silence filled the other end of the call. I opened my mouth and finally brought an end to a relationship that had lasted 13 years. Bradley, let's never see each other again in this lifetime. Then I hung up. Claude wrapped his arms around me from behind. At that exact moment, fireworks exploded across the night sky outside the window. Old memories are always replaced by new ones, and every day of the future would surely shine brighter than the fireworks themselves. Chapter Extra. The Moo Group was on the verge of bankruptcy. His phone was being bombarded with calls. One call after another. Bradley had far too many things he should have been doing, but all he did was go home. Back to the home he had once shared with Melissa. To the outside world, Melissa had always been decisive and formidable. But at home, she often showed a softer, more feminine side. In the beginning, she loved decorating the house with little touches. Fresh flowers, rugs, paintings, small ornaments. Sadly, neither of them ever truly returned there again. Bradley had never paid much attention to those things before. But now, he felt Melissa's presence everywhere, like countless needles piercing through his heart. Bradley raised his left hand, and remembered the days shortly after they got engaged. Melissa had leaned against his chest, holding his left hand in both of hers, studying it with the same curiosity a child would have while watching a trail of ants. Bradley, your love line is so long. Bradley lowered his gaze, following the direction of her long eyelashes. When he was young, his mother had once taken him to have his fortune read. The fortune teller had said that his love line was broken, that he was destined to live a lonely life. But the scar he got from stopping a knife with his bare hand seemed to have extended that severed love line. Melissa stared at it for a long time. Her eyelashes trembled slightly. Then she pressed an incredibly gentle kiss to his palm. Her favorite song was still playing through the speakers. In this life, when two destined souls meet on a narrow road, neither can escape. And suddenly, intertwined lines appear in the palm of the hand. Bradley lowered his head and gently kissed his own palm, as though he were finally returning. 5 years too late. That shy and precious kiss Melissa had once given him. A cold tear fell, then another. Bradley covered his eyes with both hands, and finally broke down in tears. After all, he had squandered the most precious gift fate had ever given him.